Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome to our Avatar pre-release prep video. So, if you haven't had time to watch any other content about this set, this is the video for you. In 10 minutes, I'm going to try to get you up to speed with what's going on in the set, so you can be a little bit more prepared for your pre-release. So, let's just jump in. I think the best place to start here is talking about the 4 bending mechanics. I just came off of playing the Arena Early Access event, so I've had my hands on the cards at this point, and I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on here. So we're going to start with Airbending. I've been pretty impressed with Airbending. So this mechanic says when you airbend something, sometimes it says non-land, sometimes it's creature. Be careful about that. Read your cards. You get to exile that thing, and its owner can cast it for 2 mana later. So it's almost like bouncing something with, a little bit of a twist on it. And sometimes you airbend your own things. There's sagas in this set, so airbending a saga, maybe in response to the last chapter, that's kind of a cool thing to do. You can blink any good enter the battlefield effects, that's something that's come up. But I found mostly, it's just like a tempo mechanic. It gets things out of the way so you can start attacking. I think roughly the split is like 75-25, 75% I'm going to target my opponent's stuff, 25% I'll target my own stuff. But, it's going to vary deck to deck. I guess one little thing to note, might be a little confusing, is this still has to respect timing restrictions. So if you airbend a card with flash, they can cast that instant speed. But if you airbend just a normal creature without flash, then, they still have to cast that at sorcery speed. And you too. Next up is Earthbending. Earthbending says when you Earthbend, target land becomes a 0/0 creature, and you put whatever number the Earthbend is, that number of counters on that land. And then when that land were to die or get exiled, it comes back to the battlefield tapped as a land with no counters on it. So it just goes back to its natural state. I found this mechanic to be pretty good. Just turning your lands into creatures. Hasty creatures can be pretty good. Some non-obvious things, you can stack Earthbending on your land. So if you want to Earthbend 2 and then Earthbend 2, you can keep growing one land big, or you can spread it out, go wide with it. Depends on whatever the game state wants you to do. At first blush, it doesn't seem like there's that much synergy, really, with this mechanic and the rest of the cards in the set. It's kind of just what you see is what you get. But there is a +1/+1 counter theme in black-green, so that's one thing. And also, Earthbend plays well with cards that sacrifice, right? Because you Earthbend land, you sacrifice that land, and you're not actually losing a card, right? It just turns back into a land. Next up is Waterbending, and Waterbending is sort of a cross between Improvise and Convoke, so you can tap your creatures to pay for these costs. And these costs are usually activated abilities on creatures, something like this Water Tribe Rallier, which is really strong. So this is Waterbend 5, so tap any combo of lands, creatures, artifacts you control, look at the top 4 cards of your library, take a small creature from among them, put it into your hand. And there's a lot of support for this mechanic. There's a card like Forecasting Fortune Teller, which is one of the top commons, by the way. 2 mana, 1/3, that makes a clue. That's just pretty good. It makes 2 permanents for your waterbending abilities. There are also cards that care about being tapped, so something like Grand, another really strong card. I like this card quite a bit. And this is a little bit more of a defensive mechanic, I would say. Not exclusively, but it's really nice to be able to say, all right, I'm going to play some creatures. I'm going to, build out an army of blockers, and I'm just going to sit back, pass the turn, I can block, I can waterbend end of turn. This is an instant speed thing. It's not restricted to sorcery speed. It's a lot worse if you're like, all right, well, I'm going to plan to be attacking every turn. Well, then you're going to have to pay real mana most of the time. Next is Firebending, and I think this is the most interesting of the bunch. We really haven't seen too many mechanics like Firebending before. So you'll have Firebending and then a number, and it says whenever this creature attacks, you add red mana, and this mana only lasts until the end of combat. So often on the Firebending cards, it'll give you a place to put that mana, something like the Fire Sages here. But there's other things to spend the mana on. So combat tricks, that's a pretty big one. You can cast your trick and also still play some creatures that turn. You can crack a clue with the mana. You can cast an instant speed removal spell like Lightning Strike. I would say out of all the mechanics, this one has the highest ceiling, but also the lowest floor, right? Because at its best, if you've got a deck with a lot of instants, a lot of ways to spend mana at instant speed, it's going to be really good. You have just giant bursts of mana each combat. That's really powerful. But if you don't, and you don't have some of the better Firebending cards that have these activated abilities built in, it can kind of just do nothing, right? So while the other 3 bending mechanics to kind of just work on their own, this is the one I think that requires a little bit of deck building, a little bit more thinking. Lessons make a return in the set. They don't exactly work the same way they did back in Strixhaven if you played that. So that was where we had Lesson and Learn. There are no Learn cards in this set. And so the reason you care about lessons is because there's a lot of cards that just say when you have lessons in your graveyard, I get better, or whenever you cast a lesson, you do a thing, right? It's that kind of mechanic. One of the better lessons, this one's really nice. Accumulate Wisdom, 2 mana. look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and if you have 3 lessons in your graveyard, you just draw 3 instead. So 2 mana, draw 3. Very, very powerful if you can enable it. I want to call out Sparring Dummy here, because this card might not look that impressive, but I think it's really powerful. So 2 mana, 1/3 Defender. Tap it, mill a card. You can put a land you milled into your hand this way, so it just keeps drawing you lands, which is good. You know, a lot of times you kind of think, oh, I don't want to keep drawing lands, but you do want to draw lands when you've got expensive cards in your deck. Early in the game, you want to hit your land drops, and if you mill a lesson instead, you gain 2 life. And incidental life gain also pretty powerful. You'll also find some cards that care about shrine cards. So if you haven't seen shrines before, there are these enchantments that basically get better the more shrines you have, and they incentivize you to play multicolor because they're all legendary, so you can't just stock up on a bunch of Spirit Oases, for example. You want to be able to assemble all 5 of them. I'm a little bit hesitant about these shrines in draft. I think maybe just a little bit too slow, but in sealed, I think they're pretty real. I think it's worth building around if you've got the cards that care about shrines, if you've got the fixing. There's pretty decent fixing in the set, so not something that I'm like dying to go after. But if you've got the pool and, you know, maybe your deck is lacking some card draw, lacking some value, I think it's a pretty good thing to go for. We have a really interesting cycle of monocolored payoffs, and I think they're all pretty good. So these really, really want you to have all the same land type. Gather the White Lotus. I just had a deck with 4 of these in it. It was an absurd deck. I was mono white. And if you can cast this card with 5 planes, or, you know, more as the game goes on, make 5 tokens on turn 5 and scry 2, super powerful. And I think they're all pretty good. Even this red one, which, you know, pause to read if you want to. It's a really weird card, but I think if your deck is all mountains, it's worth it. In sealed, it's definitely hard to have a monocolor deck. You just can't support that a lot of the time. But I think, aside from the red one, which I think you really do need to be mono red for to make sure it functions, I think you can play these other ones, the Catgator, the Waterbending Scroll, the Rockalanche, on like 12 of the land type at a minimum. I think they're playable at that point. They're not going to be at their best, but they're going to be playable. I want to call it this cycle of rare lands. These are all just lands that come in tapped unless you control a basic land, which you definitely will have a basic land. And they've all got pretty good abilities, and they're pulls into their colors. So I think the white one here, the best one, just 4 mana, put a counter on each of your creatures. That's awesome. But all of them to varying degrees. Maybe the red one might be the worst of them, but they're all quite strong, and yeah, I would definitely want to play this color if I open these lands. A few more notes here. Avatar Enthusiast is a card that I want to call out. So I'm usually pretty down on these cards that start small and then grow. You know, you're paying 3 mana for a 2/2, that's pretty bad. But I found that this card in particular, I had this in my my mono white deck I was talking about, and literally every creature I had was an ally, and I don't think it's very hard for that to happen. There's just a ton of allies in the set. By the way, that's the creature type that matters in the set. There's going to be a lot of cards that care about allies, and this essentially said when a creature enters, you put a counter on this, and I had multiple cards that made multiple allies. So yeah, keep your eye out for this one. If you're used to these cards being bad, I wouldn't write this one off as long as you've got enough allies. One trap card I want to call out is Destined Confrontation. So this is a pseudo field wipe. It's never really going to work out how you want it to. I think it's really difficult to break the symmetry on this card. It can't do the thing where it's like, okay, I'm not going to play my creatures early, and then I'm going to cast this on turn 4, and, you know, I'm going to 3-for-1 my opponent. I would really recommend not playing this card. It looks like a pretty powerful card, and I'm not saying you're not going to get gotten by it sometimes, but on average, this card is not going to be good. I think this counts as a trap. And then the last thing I want to call out is a really, really strong card. I think one of the best cards in the set, but it's very easy to misread. So this is a Mythic Saga, The Legend of Yang Chen, and the first chapter here says, starting with you, each player chooses up to 1 permanent with mana value 3 or greater from among permanents your opponents control, exile those permanents. So it's kind of easy to misread this as you get to choose your opponent's thing and your opponent gets to choose your thing and you get to exile both of them. Not how it works. It's just weird wording for multiplayer. Basically, this just says when this enters, exile one of your opponent's permanents with mana value 3 or greater. Just wanted to call that out because I can see a lot of people reading that and being like, that's really bad. I don't want that, and not putting this card in their deck. You very much should put this card in your deck. It's very strong. And that's going to do it. Just a quick little pre-release tip video. If you do want some more in-depth content, you know, follow the channel if you're not already. But also, I've done a full set review, all the cards in the set. You can go check out those videos. Good luck at your pre-release, everybody. My final piece of advice is open your packs very slowly. Go through your cards slowly as to not get jump scared if you happen to open Cruel Tutor.